What do Somalia, South Sudan, and the United States of America have in common? At this very moment, they are the three only countries in the world that have not yet committed to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. On a more positive note, 194 states have rallied around the convention, with Palestine as the latest party to join last April. This year, in November, the Convention on the Rights of the Child will exist for 25 years, and in the run-up to that event, we already see many reports coming out, asking questions about what have we gained, and what is there still to do after 25 years of the CRC, as the Convention is also often referred to. When I think of it, first of all, I want to say that I think it's really amazing that 194 states have found reason to commit to the Convention and to embrace it, including the 4 general principles that the Convention presents as key directions for any work to be done or decisions to be made about children. Now, what are these 4 general principles? 1, it's the survival and development of children that should be the main goals to pursue. 2, children should not be discriminated. 3, when we make decisions about children, the best interest of the children should be placed first. And fourthly, in all processes affecting children, wherever possible, children and youth should have space to participate. Now, if lawmakers, policymakers, and service providers and other people working for and with children would follow these 4 general principles through, the world would be a better place for children. Has the Convention made a difference in practice? Well, there are many different answers to that question, but for me the first important very element is to say that the Convention has challenged many people working with and for children to think about and to think critically about what a child rights-based approach to their work could mean and how to practice it, and what are the obstacles in formulating child rights-based approaches and in practicing them. In a much more formal way, I think one of the most important products that have come about in 25 years of the Convention on the Rights of the Child is processes of law reform that we have seen happening in many countries after they joined the Convention. And where children's rights, through the adoption of new laws and the revision of old laws, children's rights became recognized in national legal systems like never before. And a clear example of an area where this has come about very significantly is the area of juvenile justice, which is about, say, roughly children who committed crimes or who have been accused of having committed crimes. It's about issues relating to arrest, detention, and trial of children. And roughly before the Convention, well, many countries didn't have special legislation to deal with the situation of these children. And then such children would be treated exactly in the same way as adults were. And you can imagine that that will lead to, potentially leads to serious problems in practice. After the Convention, many states have now special juvenile justice arrangements. Now, I'm not naive about the Convention, and I know that there is still a lot of work to do. And at present, there is not a single country that could claim that it actually lives up to the Convention's requirements in their entirety. And we all know that many children are still suffering from child rights violations, from lack of participation, and from lack of opportunities to develop their full potential. But I also know, and I've seen many examples in the field of well-designed and well-implemented child rights-based approaches to such problems, making an important difference in practice. And one example that I can give here this afternoon is an example relating to NGO work on the right to birth registration in the Philippines. Now you might think, birth registration, that is a very bureaucratic issue to highlight. It's about a registration office in a municipality doing paperwork. But it's important to realize that birth registration in practice often is the beginning of the realization of children's rights. Because without birth registration, a child doesn't formally exist in the eyes of the state. And also, the age of a child is not formally recorded. And this can lead to all kinds of problems for children to access education, to access healthcare, to access social security. Now, the NGO in the Philippines that I worked with, on the basis of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, came to the conclusion that, one, birth registration is a right and not just a service to be provided to children. And secondly, the NGO concluded that, according to the convention, to which the Philippines is one of the state's parties, is obliged to make this happen. So it's the government that has an obligation to make this happen. With that message, the NGO approached the government of the Philippines, more in particular the Civil Registration Office, and it involved the municipalities, but also local communities. And they made an extra effort in order to realize an inclusive system of birth registration. Because, well, as you might imagine, it is easier to make sure that children who live in an easily accessible urban area are registered than it is to do the same for children who live in remote places. So then, for example, through using mobile registration offices, which are open during weekend days, so that people could come down from the hills where they live to actually register their children, was important. But also, where that was necessary, registration fees were dropped. After all, you shouldn't have to pay for a right that you have. As a result of these efforts made, the registration levels went up dramatically. And at a certain moment, the NGO actually could draw the conclusion, okay, our job is done here, we pull out of the project, but they only did so after they made sure that the government would continue. And that is still the case as of today. And this example thereby also illustrates that for realizing children's rights, it's really important to involve all of society. Realizing children's rights, yes, requires governments to do certain things, but it also requires involvement of all kinds of other members and parties in the society, of the people most immediately around the children, caretakers, parents, children themselves, obviously, local municipalities, central government, and a lot of other actors that are in between. Now, having the convention is all very well. But what else do we need to make progress? And there, one of the things that I am working on at the moment, and that I think is extremely important, is that we need more hard data about children. On the one hand, we know a lot, or we think we know a lot about the problems of children. But when we zoom into particular situations and really get into the details of particular situations or of particular groups of children, then quite soon, very often, we find out that we actually don't know all the details that we need to know in order to understand the problem. And this applies both to the south, to developing countries, but also to the north. Mind you, the government of the Netherlands has several times been reprimanded by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child for not being able to produce the required figures, the required statistical data about children in the Netherlands that the CRC committee is asking for in its reporting procedure. And from a child rights perspective, and especially the aspect of inclusiveness that I was referring to before, it's really important to have specific information on particular groups such as indigenous children, on children with disabilities, or to know what are the consequences of certain problems for boys as compared to girls. And there we still have a lot of work to do in terms of data gathering. Now again you might think, oh yeah, another bureaucratic detail, statistical data. But in practice, this data gap really is a serious challenge for those who try to make policies or do projects for and with children. Because if you don't know exactly what the problem is, how can you fix it? I'm one of the founders of the Kids' Rights Index, and that is an attempt to draw attention to the issue of the data that we lack on children. And it's very clear that on certain issues, in most countries, actually, we have no reliable data at all. Child abuse is a clear example, where in many countries it's really hard to know what the real situation is in terms of child abuse. And obviously this has to change, and the Kids' Rights Index is meant to expose the need for change and to, in that way, make a contribution. On other issues, there is data, but no hard conclusions are drawn on how states are doing in tackling these issues. The Kids' Rights Index combines existing information from UNICEF, which each year publishes the state of the world's children, and from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and then it ranks states on their child rights performance. And it's really interesting to see what happens when you do that, when you rank states. That triggers people's attention and has proven to be a really interesting way of starting debates about the facts underlying and the performance record underlying the rank of a state in the index. It's all the information that we used for that exercise and also all the results are publicly available in a website, kidsrightsindex.org. It's still very much work in progress, but at present already, the Kids' Rights Index material allows for quick scans on how states are doing in terms of working with the general principles of the Convention, which I outlined for you at the beginning of my talk. And also in terms of making available budgets. Budgets, of course, benefiting children. The outcomes of this exercise, in my opinion, are very interesting and at times also unexpected. For example, the Kids' Rights Index results clearly make the point that, of course, the development level of a country is an important basis for what that country can do in terms of realizing children's rights. But it also shows very clearly that political will to make the maximum effort for children is equally important, if not more important. And that, for example, comes out in the fact that a developing country such as Thailand ranks unexpectedly high in the Kids' Rights Index, whereas a developed country, member of the European Union, Italy, ranks unexpectedly low in the Kids' Rights Index. Now, this brings me to the end of my talk. The bottom line of my contribution is that, in my view, all work on children's issues should be child rights based. And on that note, I challenge all professionals working with and for children, but also all of us, to think hard about what we can do to develop a child rights based approach to our work, to apply it in our work if that is possible, and also in our personal lives. Thank you.